There are moments in a marriage that do not announce themselves as endings. They arrive quietly. They sit down at the table beside you, and by the time you recognize them for what they are, they have already made their decision. This is the story of Simone Carter and the family that never understood what they were sitting on. Simone was 36 years old when her mother-in-law placed the divorce papers on the dining room table in the family's Buckhead estate and said, "We think it is time." Simone looked at the papers. She looked at the table. She looked at her husband of 7 years, Brandon Whitfield, sitting 3 seats away with his eyes fixed somewhere near the window. Then she reached across the table and said 4 words, "Give me a pen." She signed without hesitating, not because she had not read them. She had read every page 3 days earlier, when her attorney sent her the draft and she had sat in the parking garage of her office building in Atlanta and gone through the entire document with the precision of a woman who had been preparing for this moment longer than anyone in that room understood. She signed because she was ready. She had been ready for a while. Simone had met Brandon Whitfield at a finance conference in Charlotte 7 years before. He was the kind of man who filled a room without trying, confident, easy with people, the sort of person who remembered your name the second time he met you and made you feel like that meant something. She had liked him immediately. She had not planned on falling in love with him, but she had, in the slow and certain way that happens when something feels genuinely safe. She was the only child of Dr. Raymond Carter, a quiet man from Atlanta's West Side, who had spent 4 decades building one of the most significant private equity portfolios in the Southeast. He had done it without press releases, without his name on buildings, without the kind of noise that invites attention before you are ready for it. He believed that the most powerful seat at any table was the one no one thought to offer you. He had raised his daughter to understand that. Her father passed away 2 years before she married Brandon. He left her everything. She managed it the way he had taught her, without performance, without announcement. She did not bring it up at dinner parties. She did not need to. The Whitfield family had old Atlanta money and the particular manner that comes with it. They welcomed Simone the way that kind of family welcomes anyone they have not chosen, with smiles that arrived on schedule and departed just as precisely, with warmth that was always just formal enough to remind you it was optional. Margaret Whitfield, Brandon's mother, had made her assessment of Simone in the first week and had not revised it since. Wrong background, too self-contained. Not the kind of woman who would fold herself into the family the way Margaret had always expected Brandon's wife to fold. For 7 years, Simone had shown up every Thanksgiving in Buckhead, every 4th of July at the family lake house in Lake Lanier, every Sunday dinner where Margaret held court, and Simone sat at the table and was pleasant and present and never once gave anyone a reason to say anything directly. She had learned Margaret's preferences. The sweet tea with just 1 sugar, the seating arrangement she liked, the particular topics she wanted raised, and the ones she wanted left alone. She had done all of this without being asked and without mentioning that she had done it. The Sunday before she called her attorney, she did not go to dinner. She sat in her kitchen in their midtown condo for a long time. Then she made coffee and she called her attorney and she said, "Let's begin." The family meeting was held on a Thursday evening at the Buckhead estate. Margaret had arranged it with the efficiency of a woman who had been planning something for quite some time. There were 6 people in the room. Brandon's 2 brothers, his uncle Robert, Margaret, and Simone. Margaret did most of the talking. She used words like alignment and the family's direction and what is best for Brandon's future. She said that Simone had always been a welcome presence in their lives, and that sometimes the kindest thing was honesty. Then she looked at Simone across the table and said, "You were always a guest in this family, not a member." Simone looked at Brandon. Brandon looked at the window. That was the moment, not the words, not the papers, not the 7 years of dinners where she had been tolerated rather than loved, of holidays where she had been included in the photographs and excluded from the conversations that mattered, of small, precise moments that added up to a message delivered so consistently that it had become impossible to pretend she had not received it. The moment was Brandon looking at the window. He had done it before. At the family Christmas 2 years ago, when his brother made a comment about Simone's neighborhood growing up and the table laughed and Brandon had studied his plate. At his cousin's wedding rehearsal dinner, when Margaret had introduced Simone to a family friend as Brandon's wife, and then talked about the friend's daughter for 15 minutes, and Brandon had checked his phone. He loved her in the private moments. She had never doubted that. But in the public moments, the ones that required him to choose between her and the approval of his family, he had never once chosen her. For 7 years, she had told herself the private moments were enough. Sitting at that table, watching him find something deeply interesting near the window, she understood completely and finally that they were not. She took the pen. She signed. She stood straightened her blazer, and picked up her bag. At the door, she paused, not to say anything, just to feel the weight of the room. She was leaving for the last time, the Sunday dinners, the holidays at Lake Lanier. The window Brandon was still looking at. Then she walked out. The Whitfield family's longtime accountant was a man named Gerald Hayes. He had been with the family for 26 years. He had arrived as a young CPA from Georgia State and had stayed because he was meticulous and because the Whitfield family paid correctly and expected quality in return. He had seen a great many things in 26 years. He had learned which things to ask about and which things to simply record. He had been in the hallway the evening Simone left. He was there to drop off quarterly documents that could not wait until morning. He watched her walk to her car in the circular driveway. He watched her sit in it for a moment without starting the engine. Then she started it and drove out through the iron gates without looking back. Gerald went to his office. He sat down, and for a reason he could not fully explain, he opened the investment portfolio files he had been reconciling that week and began reading them not as an accountant tallying figures, but as a man asking a question he had never thought to ask before. He had always known that the Whitfield Family Trust had a foundational capital investment from an outside private equity source. It had been part of the structure before he ever joined. It was so embedded in the architecture of the family's finances that he had long since stopped looking at it directly and had simply built everything else around it, the way you build around a load-bearing wall, without questioning why it is there. That evening, for the first time, he looked directly at it. He followed the documents back. The original capital injection, the source portfolio, the name of the fund, the name of the man who had established it, the date of his death, the name of his sole heir, Dr. Raymond Carter, sole beneficiary, Simone Carter. Gerald sat back in his chair. The foundational investment that had allowed the Whitfield Family Trust to expand into commercial real estate, to acquire 3 companies in the 2015 market dip, to absorb 2 periods of significant loss without restructuring. The investment that had been a quiet engine underneath everything the Whitfield family called their legacy had come from Simone's father's portfolio. It had been Simone's money. It had been Simone's money for 11 years. And 3 days ago, Simone's legal team had filed a notice of intent to review all instruments tied to that portfolio pending the finalization of the divorce. Gerald sat with that information for a long time. Then he called Brandon. Brandon answered on the second ring, in the voice of a man who had spent the evening being told by his family that he had made the right decision. Gerald said, "Brandon, there's something in the accounts I need you to see." Brandon said, "Can it wait until morning?" Gerald said, "Do you know where money came from?" Brandon said, "What money?" Gerald said, "All of it." There was silence on the line. Then Brandon said, "I'll come now." The review took 3 weeks. Simone's legal team was thorough. The documents were older than the marriage and completely current in their implications. The portfolio review triggered a formal restructuring of the Whitfield Family Trust that reduced its primary capital base by a figure that Gerald, in 26 years of careful professional language, had never had to describe before. He described it as material. Margaret Whitfield called Simone on the 4th day. Simone did not answer. Brandon called 14 times over 2 weeks. He sent 2 letters through his attorney. He drove to Simone's office building in Midtown one Tuesday morning and sat in his car in the parking structure across the street for 40 minutes. He did not go in. He drove home. The house was not empty. His family was still there, still present, still the structure of everything he had chosen. But it was quieter in a way he had not prepared for. Quieter in the way of a place where something that had been running underneath everything, so constant that you had stopped hearing it, had simply stopped. He thought about the Sunday dinners. He thought about the Sunday 3 weeks before the papers when she had not come, and he had not called to ask why, and had told himself it probably meant nothing. He thought about a great many things he had told himself. 40 days after the divorce was finalized, a journalist from an Atlanta business publication ran into Simone outside a building in Buckhead, where she had just completed a new investment deal. She looked well. She looked, the journalist would write later, like a woman who had set down something very heavy and found that she moved faster without it. The journalist asked how she was doing. Simone thought about it for a moment. Then she said, "My father taught me that the most powerful seat at any table is the one no one thinks to offer you. I spent 7 years at a table where no one thought to offer me anything. I'm done waiting to be offered. I'm building my own table." She walked to her car. She did not look back. That evening, Gerald Hayes sat alone in his office and closed the last of the restructuring files. He set his pen down. He looked at the ledger in front of him. He sat in the quiet of what he now understood completely. not just the numbers, but the full shape of what the numbers meant. He had watched Simone Carter walk out of that house. He had watched her sit in her car for a moment and then drive away without once looking back. He understood now that she had known exactly what she was walking away from and exactly what would cost them. She had known before any of them. He opened his notebook. On a clean page, in the careful handwriting of a man who had spent 26 years making sure every figure was exactly right, he wrote 3 words. She built this. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And tell me in the comments, who do you think lost more in the end, Brandon or his mother? I will see you in the next story.